most amazing artists, and welcome back to my at-home studio. Today we are going to do some printmaking and I'm so excited. The form of printmaking that we're going to do today is called a collagraph. A collagraph is when you take a surface, and today we're going to use this kind of cardboard, and I'll show you how to use that in just a second. But it's basically a surface that you add things on top of so that the surface becomes raised. So after we make the base of our collagraph, that's basically the raised surface, we are going to do what's called a rubbing or a print. Quickly, let's go over all of the things that you will need to create your collagraph in rubbing. So for the base of your collagraph, you will need some type of cardboard. I'm going to be using these collected pieces of chipboard from macaroni boxes, cereal boxes, anything that you have lying around. You will also need some glue. You can use a glue stick, a glue bottle. I like to use a little cup of glue and a little glue brush. You will also need some type of paper. You can use any kind of paper that you have. And last but not least, you will need some crayons. And if you notice, my crayons that I have, they don't have the paper on them. To get your crayons like this, all I did was I soaked them in warm water for just a few hours, and then the paper slips right off of your crayons. So that is everything that you're going to need. So let's go ahead and get started. I forgot to mention that you also need a pair of scissors. But the first thing that we're going to do is, you can see I've already made this box flattened, and what I need to do is cut it so it lays flat and open. I'm just choosing a corner here as a guide for where to cut. So after you cut it, you should have a big old surface to work on. I don't really need this huge of a surface, so I'm just going to start cutting off these sections. Again, using the corners of my box, those are these lines here, as a guide to cut a straight line. Okay, so what we need is just one flat surface to be the base of our collagraph. So I'm going to choose this one here. You want it to be big enough to hold your entire picture. But I want to cut off these panels, and I can use those later for when I start adding my details. Okay, so I have the base of my collagraph cut out, and then I still have all these other panels that I can use to make the details for my collagraph. What I want to make today is a spring bouquet of flowers. So the first thing I'm going to do is make the pot for my flowers. And I want to show you a cool trick on how to cut out a symmetrical shape. When a shape is symmetrical, it means it is exactly the same on both sides. If you cut it in half, each side is equal. So what we're going to do to make the pot for our spring flower bouquet is, I'm going to turn this over and fold it in half. So I've just drawn half of my flower pot here. And when you cut a piece of cardboard that's folded in half, it makes it a little bit more hard to cut, so you really got to use those muscles. But always, when you're using scissors, you need to make sure that you are cutting away from yourself. You never want to cut towards yourself, because that would be dangerous. Because I folded my cardboard in half and cut it out that way, when I open it up, it is equal or symmetrical on both sides. Flowers are very organic. That means the shape of them is very curved. So today we're going to be using organic shapes. Maybe you want to use geometric shapes. Geometric shapes are symmetrical, so they are the same on both sides. My flower pot here is a geometric shape. For our flowers, we're going to want to use curved shapes, more organic shapes that aren't necessarily the same on both sides. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm just drawing out some flower shapes that I will cut out. And you can add as many flowers or as little flowers as you want to. And you will want a variety of different sizes of flowers. So maybe you have bigger, medium-sized flowers and then some smaller ones. That means you have a variety of sizes, a bunch of different sizes. As I'm cutting, you can see this hand that's holding my cardboard is the one that's moving. My scissors are staying in the same place. They're going in the same direction. My other hand that's not holding the scissors is twisting the cardboard around to tell my scissors where to cut. It's just following the line that I drew. To make the stems for our flowers, I just have one long piece of cardboard here. This is from the side of my cereal box. And I'm gonna cut long, skinny strips to make the stems for our flowers. I don't think they need to be this long because then our flowers would go off of our flat surface. And we want it all to stay on this surface here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to cut different lengths. Now that I have a variety of different shapes and sizes of flowers, what we need to do, and a variety of stems, what we need to do is start arranging how we want our flowers to be on our Collagraph. We don't want to glue anything down yet because we need to play with a couple different compositions. That is the placement of our flowers. Where are we going to place each of these flowers? And what I'm doing here is you can see this flower is more in the background and this flower is on top. That's called overlapping whenever they go on top of one another. You can do some overlapping if you want to, but you don't have to. I think I am happy with that arrangement. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start gluing. Don't glue until you're happy with how things are placed. I almost forgot to put my stems in there. Let's go ahead and put those in there. When you have all of these different overlapping shapes, it's important that whenever you glue the flowers that are in the very back. You have to glue those ones first. And then the things that are in the middle, you glue those next. And these flowers that are on top here, those get glued on last. So let's go ahead and get to gluing. You don't need a lot of glue though, so just a little dot, not a lot, and it'll go a long way. I think that my composition may have changed just a little bit, but overall, I think it looks pretty good. You can see I have some flowers in the back, some are in the middle, and some are right on top. I noticed that some of my edges were coming up, so I just put a little bit more glue, and they still wanted to pop up, so I just held it down in place and counted to 10. And like I said before, you don't have to do this many flowers. You can just have one big, beautiful flower if you want to. Now we need to glue on our flower pot because the stems are inside or behind our flower pot, so we want to glue that on top. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that now. You can stop here where you just have your flowers in your pot, or you can add more details to your flowers. If you wanted to cut out a circle maybe and add it to the inside of your flowers. Maybe you want to add some type of pattern to your flower pot, and maybe you want some leaves in there. So I'm going to go ahead and add those last little details to the top of this and glue them down, and then we will be ready for our rubbing. I have glued down all of my little details, And I've allowed my glue to dry. I'm just gonna do the wiggle test to make sure none of my little pieces fall off. Do a little wiggle, and if nothing comes off, then you're good to go. If a piece or two falls off, then just re-glue it down. We are going to create a rubbing from this. Because we added all of these different shapes on top of a flat surface, if you feel it, it kind of has a texture. Anything that has a texture, you can make a rubbing from. On top of our Collagraph, we are just going to place a piece of paper. And like I said at the beginning of this video, you will need a crayon that has no paper on it, because instead of the top or the bottom of the crayon, to create our rubbing, we are going to use the side of the crayon. And you can use any color that you want. You can use a bunch of different colors. It doesn't really matter. The most important thing is that whenever you begin your rubbing, you want to make sure your paper stays in place. You can just hold it down with your hand, but I find that mine still moves around a lot, so I'm just going to tape it in place. Now my paper will not move around. If your paper does move around whenever you do a rubbing, it's going to make your picture look a little bit blurry. Take the side of your crayon and gently begin to color your paper using the side of your crayon. Don't press down too hard yet, because we only want a little bit at first. As you can see, just a little bit of my Collagraph is showing through. If you didn't tape your paper down, you'll want to use your other hand that's not holding the crayon to make sure your paper isn't moving around. After I got most of my paper covered, I'm gonna start pressing down a little bit harder to make sure all of my details are showing. The harder you press with your rubbing, the darker it will be. I'm really pressing down harder now to make sure all of those details are showing up as best as they can. After you get done with your rubbing, you can take the tape off, and that is basically it. This is a form of printmaking because you can do as many rubbings as you want from this one Collagraph. So you can use this over and over and over again to make as many rubbings as you want to. And maybe after you've done your first rubbing, you realize that actually you want to add maybe a bee up in the corner, or a sun, or some grass in the background. Then you can go ahead and add those to your Collagraph and do another rubbing to see if you like it better. So that is how you make a Collagraph and a rubbing. So I actually did a few different rubbings just to see which colors would look nice. These would be an amazing gift for Mother's Day. I actually did this one for my mom because her favorite color is blue. Something extra that you can do to your rubbing is actually just outline it with marker so that you can more clearly see where your flowers and pot are. As always, if you give this a try, then send some pictures of your beautiful masterpieces to me because I love to see them. Keep up the good work, make it a great week, and I'll talk to you guys soon.